I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And this week we are going to be doing the part 2 to last week's video, the 5 categories that I am unsure about in one of the most unpredictable Oscar races that I can remember. Now on year 9 of the Old Oscar Countdown, we've seen a bunch of different Oscars happen, but I think this still may be the most unpredictable, really since 2015. We started in 2016, but 2015 was one of the earlier years where I got into the Oscars, and I'm seeing a lot of parallels this year. So I'm really going to talk about the 5 categories that I'm unsure about, talk through some of my picks, but I think really highlighting these categories as ones that you also need to do a lot of thinking about, because these are the ones that are going to make or break your Oscar predictions. If you want to check out last week's video, 5 categories that I think are locks, feel free to do that so you don't have to worry about those categories, but you do have to worry about these ones. It just helps you understand where to place your emphasis, because there's a lot of categories. It's hard to kind of overthink certain ones that should be locks, but then other ones you should overthink so that you don't miss out on any surprises. And as always, if you want to hear my thoughts on a certain category, feel free to use the timestamps in the description below, and feel free to comment to let me know if there's any categories that you feel unsure about or have any questions or comments. You guys have been giving a lot of comments and a lot of engagement on these videos, so I really do love to see that, so please do continue with that. But without further ado, let's jump into things. Starting off with the big one, Best Picture. Yes, I'm still unsure of this category. I haven't been this unsure in a Best Picture category in many years, really since I'd say maybe 2017, but there was only a 2-horse race there between Three Billboards and The Shape of Water. This is, I'd say, potentially 6 movies that could win Best Picture. That is a crazy amount. Usually we have our 2-3 frontrunners, but right now I don't feel confident in any of them. So really what I want to do is kind of break down the possible scenarios, which would help maybe guide my predictions and see how different paths of movies that could win. So like I said, I really think there are 6 serious contenders that could actually win Best Picture. The first one, the frontrunner right now, I think, is The Brutalist. This is a movie that is maybe in line with more recent Oscar winners in that it's likely to win for Best Picture. There's a possibility for a Best Actor connection. We know that in recent years, the Best Director winner also wins Best Picture. Same thing with the acting categories. Oftentimes, to win Best Picture, you also have to win in one of the acting categories, so The Brutalist has a clear path there. But I mentioned earlier, I think this year reminds me a lot of 2015. And ever since I saw The Brutalist back in September at TIFF, one of the very few people to see the movie, I just have a natural instinct to think, I don't know if this is exactly a Best Picture winner. It just feels like, and this is more of a subjective opinion, so don't take this to heart, but to me it feels much more aligned with a Roma or A Power of the Dog or A Revenant, movies that are well liked and respected, in which the director wins but maybe doesn't have enough overall support and maybe a little bit too divisive to win Best Picture, particularly on a preferential ballot. And I mentioned 2015 because if you remember 2015, The Revenant won drama at the Golden Globes. It also won the BAFTA and then did not win the Oscar. And that was kind of the year where The Big Short won the PGA and Spotlight won SAG, and then Spotlight ended up winning the Oscar. And The Brutalist may have the same path as The Revenant and still not win Best Picture, winning Best Director, winning Best Actor, winning Best Cinematography, and then maybe pick up another one with something like Best Score and still not win at the Oscars, just because of the preferential ballot. And if you don't know, Best Picture has a situation that's different than the other categories in which Academy member voters rank their choices, and that does help clarify things in certain ways, because in years where there's not a clear frontrunner, like last year with Oppenheimer, or in past years with, I would even argue, Everything Everywhere All at Once at a certain point was the clear frontrunner. But in these years where we're unsure of where the frontrunner is going to be, the preferential ballot, I think, does matter, because a movie like The Revenant could win at the Golden Globes in drama or BAFTA when those groups have the traditional voting system where everyone just votes for whoever they think the winner would be. And The Revenant won in those cases, but then lost at the preferential ballot. Another interesting point is that the PGA also uses the preferential ballot, so some years that's a little bit more indicative, but they've lost out with The Big Short in 2015. They predicted 1917 in years past, in 2019, and they were wrong. So it's not an exact one-to-one. The Academy is their different own branch, but The Brutalist is giving me kind of lots of Revenant vibes, a movie that's more respected than it is well-liked. It's an epic achievement that they're going to reward the director, but maybe doesn't make you feel whole and emotionally connected. Rather, maybe a little bit more intellectually interested, and usually historically, Green Book, Coda, Everything Everywhere All at Once. These are really emotional type movies, and I don't know if The Brutalist has that same kind of a connection. That's just my gut instinct, but it is the frontrunner right now. Then another frontrunner you could say is Emilia Perez. You have to mention it just because it got 13 nominations, but with the kind of recent discovery of some of the racist tweets that Emilia Perez star Sofia Gascon has kind of revealed. She's apologized for them, but still there's those kind of tweets are out there and kind of being resurfaced. I think really took a huge blow to the Emilia Perez campaign, in particular for Best Picture. That being said, the movie is still generally well liked, 13 nominations, although I do have my suspicions as to if it can win or not. It is a very odd path if it were to win for Best Picture. I don't think it's competing in any of the screenplay categories. It is going to win, I think, likely Best Supporting Actress for Zoe Saldana. Not guaranteed, but possible for sure. And then, so let's say it wins International Film, Song, Actress, Picture. That's just an untraditional path that we don't usually see. Most of the time, Best Picture winners usually win Director, Screenplay, or Actor. So if Emilia Perez only has one acting award and then wins Best Picture, it would just be a strange path, which is one reason why I don't really see it right now, unless it kind of competes in the screenplay category. Another reason is because this controversy that I think will definitely impact it. And then there's just kind of a certain number of things that are going against it. Of course, you have this controversy that's going on right now. Generally online, though, I think the movie has been very divisive. I've been pushing against that in terms of nominations. I predicted it to get 14 nominations. It ended up getting 13, so it did very well. My bet to support and think Emilia Perez will do well in terms of nominations paid off. But I also have experience in doing this. This is our 9th season doing the Oscars on this YouTube channel. So you can go back and see my predictions. You know, I believed in Maestro and Vice and Don't Look Up and Jojo Rabbit, all divisive movies that were really hated online that did well in terms of nominations. But interestingly, none of those did that well in terms of wins. That is to say, you can be a divisive movie and get a lot of nominations, which is why I always believed in Emilia Perez on that side, but I've never really believed it in terms of a winner because it is a divisive movie. Not necessarily within the Academy, more so online, but you know that there are at least some members of the Academy that really hate the movie, which means when we're talking about Best Picture with a preferential ballot, there are going to be some people who vote number 1 for the movie, but there are also going to be a lot of people that vote for number 10. And because of how the way they tally up the points, it almost hurts you more to be a movie that's considered in that number 10 slot because you're saying, I really hate this movie. I don't want this movie to win. And when they're tallying up the votes and how they kind of do their preferential ballot ranking system, that really does hurt the Best Picture chances. Add that on to the fact that this is a Netflix movie and some people will never vote for a Netflix movie. There may be just too much going against Emilia Perez, but it did get the most amount of nominations. It still is a contender. It still is likely to win a acting prize, and we know that's a connection to Best Picture. So there's a possibility for sure for that movie. Then in kind of like the 3rd, 4th spots, I would say Anora and Conclave as equally strong kind of dark horse contenders. I think they work very well with the preferential ballot because generally I think they're very well-liked movies that aren't disliked by many people. The Brutalist, I've seen complaints about the second half of the movie. Emilia Perez, lots of people just don't like the movie outright in terms of its approach. But Anora and Conclave, I think, are generally well-liked, but maybe they don't have that level of passionate supporters. If we're giving the 2015 example, I would say they're more like the Spotlight and Big Short kind of examples there. And the important part, I think, also is that they're the 2 frontrunners to win in the adapted and original screenplay categories. And if we're predicting a 2015-like scenario, well, Spotlight won for original screenplay, I think it was original screenplay, and then won for Best Picture. So there's, a possibility to win just screenplay and picture. That's happened before. Unlikely, but it's happened before. So the fact that you have these 2 movies in pole positions to win their respective screenplay categories automatically gives them an opportunity there. I think they're both possible at winning a supporting acting category, but maybe unlikely. But Mikey Madison may be a little bit stronger there with Nora for Best Actress. So, if either one of these movies win PGA or SAG, I may be more inclined to predict them. But if a movie like The Brutalist, let's say, wins DGA, BAFTA, and then PGA, it's not nominated at SAG, then maybe there's, a clear opportunity there for The Brutalist to win. Lots of different opportunities, but if in terms of predicting maybe dark horses, Anora and Conclave, I think, are the kind of 2 obvious ones. And then you have Wicked, which is a movie that has an intense fan base, definitely, but maybe doesn't have as much appreciation internationally as seen by its number of BAFTA nominations or its international box office as compared to, what it did at the Oscars, which is still a largely American branch, even though it does have a large percentage now of international voters. I do think there is going to be some pushback as well to the fact that, the director wasn't nominated. The movie just generally, it's a part one. I don't know if people are going to want to reward part one of the story before rewarding kind of the conclusion. There's a little bit of maybe pushback towards that, but could absolutely win, let's say, PGA and then surprise at the Oscars. That's a path. Not super confident in it though right now, just because I don't see any acting wins, I don't see a screenplay win, and there's very few movies that win technical awards and then picture without even getting a directing nomination. So it is maybe a tougher path, but it does have, maybe a timely message and a lot of supporters, intense supporters, but maybe a little bit more of an Amelia Perez situation where there's going to be some people, though, I think that go, I don't like musicals that much, 8, 9, 10 on the preferential ballot, which will hurt it. And then A Complete Unknown is the kind of sixth contender, which maybe is more like Anora and Conclave, a little bit less in that it's not necessarily contending in the Best Adapted Screenplay category, and I would be surprised if it did end up winning in that category. But it's still a movie that I think pretty much everyone likes, has a very high approval rating. Not a lot of people will rank it number 10 in their ballots. And it just has a little bit of an unconventional path if it doesn't win for Best Screenplay. It could win for Timothée Chalamet for Best Actor, but nothing else. I'd be surprised if it wins in any other categories, but we know the Academy likes it. They nominated Jim Mangold, they nominated Monica Barbaro, where other groups did not, so they like the movie. And maybe just the one that everyone agrees is super well liked. That could be the scenario. It just has a weird path to win just Best Actor and then Screenplay. Really, that's the only, Best Actor and then Best Picture. That's the only path I see for it. So really just Best Picture, I think, is a really interesting category this year. There's a very realistic scenario where, let's say, Anora or A Complete Unknown win at SAG, and then Conclave wins PGA, and then BAFTA and DGA go with the Brutalist, and then who knows come Oscar night. But there's also a scenario where Brutalist wins DGA, BAFTA, and then PGA. I think at the end of the day, this upcoming weekend will be really indicative of Critics' Choice, PGA, and DGA. Where do we stand at the race right now? Really give us an understanding, particularly for this category. Then the second category that I'm really unsure about is the Best Actress category. Really two main contenders, but you would argue three. The Oscars, I'd be really surprised if any of the five win, but really there's, I think, a top three contenders. The front runner right now, I think, is Demi Moore. I think she has the clearest path at winning. Interestingly, this year BAFTA is before SAG. I think that will give her a bit of a boost, but she has pros on both sides in terms of where the momentum is standing right now. You have essentially, I think, the two frontrunners being Demi Moore and Mikey Madison. Both have movies that are well liked, both nominated in similar categories. The Substance had 5 nominations, Anora had 6, so you give a slight edge in terms of a more well-liked movie to Anora, but The Substance is still very well seen and very well liked. Demi has a lot going for her. The narrative of she's never won before, this may be the last chance to give her an Oscar, where Mikey, there's a possibility, because she's so young, to give her another Oscar down the line. But we've also seen in recent years narratives matter less. Olivia Colman beats out Glenn Close, or Anthony Hopkins beats out Chadwick Boseman. These narratives don't necessarily matter, but they do matter, I think, when the races are tight and when the movies are similarly well-liked. You could say Ma Rainey's Black Bottom was well-liked, but it wasn't nominated for Best Picture. The Father was, and The Father won Best Screenplay. It was a generally more well-liked movie, so they went with The Father over Ma Rainey's. Same thing with the case of The Favorite versus Glenn Close and The Wife. A narrative wasn't strong enough for a movie like The Wife to get an Oscar because they just really liked The Favorite versus, back in 2013 when Julianne Moore won for Still Alice, which wasn't a super well-liked movie. So narratives don't matter when the movies are disparate in terms of their appreciation. But in this case, The Substance and Anora are both really well liked. And they're both movies with 5 nominations and 6 nominations, both Best Picture, both Best Director. They're well liked movies. So narratives, I think, do matter when you're talking about movies that are so similarly well liked. And Demi has the stronger narrative of she's never won before, this is her time, this will be her only time. It's kind of a meta-narrative with the film as well. Comeback. They just did that recently with Brendan Fraser, so they're not opposed to doing it. And then you think about her path, like I mentioned. I think because BAFTA comes before SAG, if she wins at BAFTA, she'll definitely win at SAG. She has a strong chance at winning at BAFTA because still from a French director, that's an international voting group. They're going to be a little bit more appreciative to like this kind of a movie because it's from an international director. And then SAG, I think she maybe even has the advantage there because I think actors really resonate to that message of I could potentially, be out of Hollywood, and if I get one good part, I could be winning an Oscar and be back on top. They like that kind of a hope, and I think it's a strong actor's message. So I think to me right now is the front runner, and I'd be betting on her. But if Mikey Madison wins a Critics' Choice and then wins a BAFTA, it's going to be really a close one down to the race. And we mentioned earlier, Anora, I think, has a clear path right now still to win Best Picture. And if we think that it's winning Best Picture, well then, how could you not reward Best Picture without rewarding one of its leads? That will be a question where maybe even Demi Moore wins at BAFTA and SAG. But if you're predicting Anora for Best Picture at the Oscars after it wins, let's say, PGA and SAG in this case, well, it'll be really hard to predict for Mikey Madison not to win and then the movie to win because she's the titular character. She's so important to that movie, and it would make sense in an Oscar scenario to win screenplay, actress, and then picture. That's a traditional path. So there's this kind of debate either way, and then I haven't even mentioned someone like Fernando Torres, who hasn't been nominated anywhere else, which is why I think it would be an Oscar night surprise. It's not out of the realm of the possibility because we know that the big hurdle for her was her movie seen? Well, her movie's seen. It was nominated for Best Picture, so people are going to definitely watch it even if they didn't vote for it for Best Picture now. And if you see the movie, it's a really involving and incredible performance. The real issue with predicting her is that she won't have any momentum from this point forward. People will forget her Golden Globe speech by the time Oscar voting happens because there's going to be Critics' Choice speeches and SAG speeches and BAFTA speeches, all of which Fernando Torres won't have because she's not even nominated at those places. But is there a possibility she wins the Oscars? For sure. The Oscars nominated her movie for Best Picture. Clearly they really like the movie and they see the movie. And if you've seen the movie, she gives a really standout performance and has her own kind of a narrative of being kind of a legacy child with her mother and the connection there. So there's really potential opportunities for lots of actresses to win. I think really Mikey Madison or Demi Moore, with the surprise being Fernando Torres, with Demi being in the pole position to ultimately win the Oscar. And then the third category that I'm unsure about is the other acting category, Best Actor. Because, well, I don't think it's as much of a three-horse race as it is a two-horse race. The two-horse race is really competitive, and the two frontrunners being Timothée Chalamet and Adrien Brody. And I still right now put Adrien Brody in the lead. He won at the Golden Globes, beating out Chalamet. I thought that was notable. I also think the movie is a stronger movie to win for Best Picture. So if we think The Brutalist is winning Best Picture, I think it has to win for Best Actor. There's a scenario, like I mentioned, that it wins Best Actor and Best Director and still loses out on Best Picture. But it would help in terms of its chances of winning Best Picture to also win in this category. He's so involved in the movie. He is the main character. He is the person you're kind of rooting for or is being valorized in the movie. Now, there has been some recent controversy related to its use of AI. I think that really hurts Brody the most rather than the movie, just because there was some revelations that there was some AI usage, kind of adjusting his voice in certain voiceover scenes to match the Hungarian accent a little bit better. This is being used by other movies as well, so it's not necessarily something that I think will affect the movie's overall chances, but it could potentially affect some voters, particularly in the acting races. I mean, I don't think it's a non-factor, especially when we're talking about, the SAGs being so indicative of what's going to predict us in terms of what's going to happen at the Oscars. Well, the SAG, that's the Actors Guild that just went on strike a year ago, in part because of threats over AI. So there's going to be some members of the acting guild that go, oh, he used AI, and not read too much into it and just read the headlines and go, okay, I'm not voting for him then, because it's such a scary kind of a word and a threatening word to so many actors. They just went on strike in part because of those issues. So I don't think that's going to be a complete non-factor, and because the AI was in part related to some of the production design, but in part also to the performance, in particular by Brody. And in such a tight race where you also have a strong contender in Chalamet, that may be a different differentiator. So then let's say Chalamet wins at SAG. Now we have a split where, let's say, Brody wins at BAFTA, Chalamet wins at SAG. Who are you going to predict at the Oscars? Kind of a reverse scenario we have the years past with Brendan Fraser and Austin Butler, where Butler won the BAFTA and Fraser won at SAG, and ultimately SAG proved most successful. But also you have a bit of a reverse scenario there as well, where Adrien Brody is the older actor and Chalamet is the younger actor. Then there's going to be lots of debate as to, historically they go with the older actor, not the younger actor, so will they go with Chalamet? But they really liked A Complete Unknown, nominating James Mangold and Monica Barbaro. But they like The Brutalist a little bit more. But Adrien Brody already has an Oscar. But Chalamet is a young actor who'll probably win one later on, and this is maybe our last opportunity to reward Adrien Brody. And all this kind of a stuff that will go back and forth. There's kind of lots of pros and cons to either way. Really unsure about this category. I think, though, that if Brody wins SAG and wins BAFTA, of course he's going to win. But even still, if Chalamet wins SAG, because Brody's affected by the AI stuff, but still Brody wins at BAFTA, I may still go with Brody just because I probably would want to lean the older actor versus the younger actor. But Chalamet is a very well-liked actor. He's kind of seen, I think, by a lot of people as kind of the future of Hollywood in many respects. And that may be enough to kind of give him the Oscar. Really, really tough one to predict. Then the fourth category that I'm unsure about is the Best Editing category. And this is a category that I think is, of all the categories, the most up for grabs. Best Picture is up for grabs because it's, the big one and everyone likes to talk about it. But in terms of these smaller kind of technical categories, editing is truly up for grabs. Nobody really knows what's going to happen for editing. Any one of the nominees could potentially win. I think the Brutalist is the front runner right now because if you're thinking it's going to win for Best Picture, then you would probably predict it for Best Editing as well. The last two Best Picture winners also won in this Best Editing category. However, it's not a really strong correlation. Before Everything Everywhere All at Once, you have to go back to Argo in 2012 to find a Best Picture winner that also wins for Best Editing. So there's oftentimes not an overlap, but the past 2 years there was. So that's, I think, notable. Then you can say it's more of a traditional type of a winner, even if it doesn't win for Best Picture. It's like an Aviator or an Oppenheimer, 3-hour plus long movie, epic story, lots of editing, not in terms of it being fast-paced, but that it's a long movie, so then they give the award there. But then, it's not going to have any momentum coming into the Oscars because it wasn't nominated at Ace Eddie, it wasn't nominated at BAFTA. And then you try to think of things and you go, okay, well, what are the other contenders? Will the precursors even matter at all? Because Ace Eddie has two categories. So I think Challengers could win in one category and then Conclave wins at the other. And then BAFTA oftentimes actually does go rogue with their editing picks. They went with Baby Driver for its winner. They went with No Time to Die. Maybe they go with a Kneecap for Best Editing. That's an absolute possibility. So now we have Conclave, Challengers, Kneecap, and then there's really no frontrunner anyways. So there's going to be kind of confusion there. But I do think Conclave is a contender because it's also a Best Picture contender. It's got really kind of tightly paced movie with lots of twists and turns. I think a lot of people will think of editing, even though it's not super flashy in your face. Nora has a kind of screwball comedic timing. There's also a way to give Sean Baker an Oscar that way as well for the Best Editing. Then you could also say something like Amelia Perez, because it's lots of musical sequences and it is fast-paced in that regard and kind of balancing the different storylines and moving between genres. There's appreciation there. I think, if there is kind of an unpredictability where Challengers wins at Ace Eddie and so does Conclave, then maybe I'll go with The Brutalist. But if Anora maybe picks up Ace Eddie and then maybe also wins at BAFTA, maybe I'll go there. And there's a strong sign of support for that movie. Conclave, though, it does seem to have maybe peaked a little bit early, doing very well with the Critics' Choice Awards, where The Brutalist, even though it underperformed at a place like SAG, overperformed at a place like the Oscars, so maybe they just like the movie a little bit more. I think The Brutalist is more of the traditional winner, but, there's a scenario where it doesn't win for Best Picture and then maybe loses out on a category like this to a movie like Conclave just because they're a little bit more mixed on The Brutalist overall. Then the final category that I am unsure about ending off this video is the Best Animated Feature category. And this is a really tough category, and it is every year because there's not that many precursors. There's not that many kind of indicative precursors that kind of tell us what's going to win at the Oscars. Really the question you have to ask yourself is the Academy more in an indie mood or in a Hollywood mainstream mood? That is to say, some years they're a little bit more in a Hollywood mainstream move. mood, they'll reward Toy Story 4 over Klaus, the Hollywood movie over the indie movie. In the same way, other years, though, they'll go with The Boy and the Heron last year over a movie like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the indie movie versus the mainstream Hollywood movie. Same scenario here with The Wild Robot overperforming in terms of nominations, getting in for sound, getting in for score. Disappointing, though, and not getting in for Best Original Song. And then Flow still also overperforming, getting in for Animated Feature, but then also getting in for Best International Feature. As always, the question is indie or mainstream. You could say mainstream because DreamWorks has never won, but then you could also go, well, why has DreamWorks never won since? You could say Wallace and Gromit, but really the first year, because I'd see Wallace and Gromit as Aardman, the first year was Shrek when it won. That was the last time DreamWorks won in this category. Losing out in certain years like Big Hero 6, beating out How to Train Your Dragon. Was that because they hate DreamWorks or because they hate sequels? You don't really know. The Wild Robot doesn't have that problem. So there's a positive there. A little bit more of a traditional winner because it feels like a Pixar movie, but everyone that's seen Flow really appreciates the movie and really likes it. Even the kind of snobby international branch went for it. I think the edge goes right now to Flow just because it won at the Golden Globes, but this will be a really tight race going into the Oscars where no one will really know until it actually happens, but I'd be surprised if it's anything other than Flow or The Wild Robot. It's anyone's best guess at this point. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below and let me know your predictions for these categories. And stay tuned. Probably next Monday, I'll be doing a reaction pod to PGA, DGA, and Critics' Choice Awards. And then also my favorite video of the year, the Connors, which is my own personal award show where I give out my favorite movies of the year, my favorite performances. That will be coming out probably mid next week, or maybe Monday, depending on if I do the PGA, DGA, Critics' Choice Awards video. But subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss out on any of the possible scenarios. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.